Welcome to the third session of Carlam Cymru. Today's physics session, we're going to look at graph skills, and over the next 45 minutes, we're going to look at how graphs and understanding how to use graphs to get to answers in physics will actually have a massive impact on your overall grade. So looking back at previous years, I've seen some of the keywords that come out of graphs, and what you should understand for graphs is things such as expectation of what graph you should be able to do in an exam. So to do that, you need to look at some of the fundamentals. After looking at some fundamentals, we look at basic stuff such as drawing lines, and not just that, once you have a line, how to describe them. So a linear graph or a non-linear graph and what they mean. And then finally get into some of the more complicated stuff that pops up in higher tier and sometimes foundation is calculating area under the graph or even the gradient. After doing all that, we will then look at some past paper questions just to show you that graph skills plays an integral part of the exam, and even understanding that content is not just the key to getting full successful marks in your exam. So looking back at the papers that have been sat and not ones that were cancelled, you can see in the 2019 and 18 papers, there were 13 and 16 marks in higher tier, and in foundation tier, there were 14 and 12 marks. But the thing to take from this is that there's 20 to 27%. So it's always 20% of the grade of the entire paper is based off of graph work. So that's quite a big chunk if you think about your overall exam. That's 1/5 to a quarter of your entire exam based on your ability to work with graphs. So let's break it down into the sections. If you are successful in doing graphs in your exams next year, what you should be able to do are things such as drawing lines, and not just lines, but lines of best fit, curves of best fit, and understand when you should use the ruler, and understand that physics do not dot to dot. We never dot to dot. We do lines of best fit, curves of best fit to help us look at trends in data. Not only this, we can then understand the relationships that are trying to be demonstrated in graphs and what they try to infer from the graph, what the graph tells us of the physics of whatever feature we're looking at, be able to describe what the graph is showing us. If the speed or if the force or if the distance increases, how does that affect the other component using words such as variables? And again, going back to this idea of independent and dependent variables, which you should have seen through the years in school so far. On top of this, guys, one of the things you would be working on is plotting a graph. So simply put, here's the table, can you plot the graph? And that's always a nice, hopefully easy 3 marks minimum, depending on how much they expect of you. Once you plotted some graphs, you could also be asked to describe how the graph would change if one of the variables was increased or doubled. How would that affect the other end? So we're going to look at how we word and what type of keywords we use in this. Not only this, another one that always picks up easy marks once you get used to it is calculations. Can you calculate the gradient of the graph? Can you calculate the area under the graph? And hopefully you'll get to see that a lot of these calculations is just using rules from math, such as working out the area of a triangle or a rectangle, or as hard as a trapezium. And then finally, there has been a couple of questions where they've given 1 or 2 graphs and some nice simple marks. Can you describe the difference between the 2 graphs? That includes words such as steeper, which means something in terms of physics, but using the word steeper or less steep or doesn't reach the same value picks up easy marks. So first of all, let's look at a simple graph. Here we have a nice easy graph, and as you can see, the independent variable is what has been written on the x-axis. We write that there because the independent variable is the variable that we should be changing. The dependent variable is the one that depends on the thing that we change. So an easy example would be if you have an elastic band and you want to see if, as you increase the distance you pull it back, does that increase the distance the elastic band is going to shoot across the room? Well, the independent variable is how far you decide to pull the elastic band back. You might decide to pull it back 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 centimeters, but the dependent variable is how far it will travel. and that clearly depends on how far you pull it back. So with the graph, make sure you understand what goes on the X and Y axis. Once you've made that decision, one of the important features is looking at the gap. The gap here from 0 to 5 is a gap of 5, and this gap each time should remain the same. You should always have a gap of 5 if your first gap is 5. A constant gap must be observed. That rule carries on to the y-axis, but notice how the y-axis has constant gaps of 0 to 1, 1 to 2 have gaps of 1s. That is crucial because the gaps on the y-axis is constant and the gaps on the x-axis is constant, but they don't interchange. You don't have to have gaps of 5 on the x and gaps of 5 on the y. Just make sure it fits all your data. And when I say fit all your data, you should always work to fit your graph over at least half of the graph paper. That way then it's nice and clear for the examiner, because they do have mark schemes that ensures you use half of the graph paper. What you can see here though, guys, is a graph done in Excel. They use dots. However, we must use X's. So do not use dots, please use X's to demonstrate the point, and the size of your X should be no more than one box to the left, right, up, down. So now you understand the fundamentals of a good graph. Let's have a look at, once you've got your graph, how do we know what line to draw, when to draw, and what we can take from that? So looking at these graphs, we have some words here now: linear versus non-linear. And there's many ways to think about this, but a linear graph is sometimes it's easy to look at the first half of the word, and what you see there is a line. So a linear graph is one that often can be described by using a nice straight line. And this bottom left graph is always a nice one to look at, because what you see here, there's a line on the graph to try and demonstrate a pattern. But notice how the line doesn't fit the x's. It doesn't have to fit or go on every x, because again, we don't dot to dot. What we do is we fit a line of best fit. What that means is we aim to have as many of the x's below and as above at the same time, so that it fits the data as best as possible, not fitting the x's like dot to dot. Non-linear graphs, on the other hand, is an example on the right hand side, and what you can see here is the data, these dots going up here, clearly curve. The gap every time it goes up decreases. There's a big gap from the first one, the next gap is smaller and smaller, and you can see here now it's not a nice straight line. That's why we call it a non-linear graph. It doesn't follow this wonderful straight line pattern that we hope to see, so we call it a non-linear graph. This is where you would do a curve of best fit, and a curve of best fit is where you take your first point and in one clean line you curve around. When you do your lines, please make sure you do it in one single pass. Don't do wispy lines. Don't do like a second attempt to try and show it more clearly, because what that does then to the examiner is you have tried to make the line thicker. You've not made it as clear. If it's like that, you should try to use a rubber to improve it, but always aim to do it in one clean movement. If it doesn't go through all the points, it's fine, because your curve of best fit demonstrates what's happening to the pattern in the data. The word anomaly here is because the anomaly is often when, sometimes, rarely, but sometimes you might have data that is anomalous, as in it stands out from the rest of the pattern. For example, if you have a data point down here, it clearly is way off of that trend line, off of this line of best fit. So it's often a good practice to put a circle around that anomaly. That way you show to the examiner, you understand that that is an anomalous data point, so you can ignore that then when you plot your curve of best fit. So after you draw lines, you now have a good graph. You picked up a few marks quite quickly, maybe 3 marks, maybe 4, maybe even 5, depending on how much graph you had to do. So descriptions. What I mean by descriptions is how do you best take a graph that has a y-axis that might be labelled B, an x-axis that might be labelled A. They both stand for something in terms of physics. Doesn't matter what at the moment. How do we describe the pattern or the effect that A has on B? What we can see in this graph straight away is that as A increases, because obviously it's going across that x-axis, we can see that B is neither going up, it's neither going down, it's remaining constant. So even though we change A, we have no effect on B. So we could say something like there is no correlation, there's no link, there's no effect. B does not have an effect on A. So as variable A changes, B doesn't change. Or even variable B is independent of variable A. So hopefully you can see that. This nice easy graph will rarely come up. It probably wouldn't come up because there's no effect of A on B. More often than not, you'll see graphs such as this here, linear. And with linear graphs, again, notice how we have nice straight lines. There's two big differences between the top graph and the bottom graph. And the biggest difference is the fact that the x-axis starts on 0 and the y-axis starts on 0 here. However, on the bottom graph, it doesn't start in that origin, in that corner. So the descriptions are similar, but it's important to understand how they're different. When you get a graph that does start on that 0, 0, that origin, we do say that A is directly proportional to B. So there's a direct proportion between A and B. And examples of this would be if you were to take A at a value of 1, you might find that B would be at a value of 1. And if you were to double A, in turn, you would, if I could draw that in a straight line, you would double B. So doubling of A would result in a doubling of B. A tripling of A would result in a tripling of B. They are in a direct proportion, so as A increases, B increases in the same proportion or at the same rate as A. Very similarly, the graph on the bottom demonstrates a proportionality between A and B. That means as A increases by a certain amount, B would also increase by a certain amount, but not directly in proportion because they don't start at the same origin. Linear graphs, hopefully you get this, guys. Keyword, directly proportional if it starts in the origin, or that A is proportional to B if it doesn't start. Non-linear, what we look for here, guys, remember, is that it's not a nice straight line, there's a curve to it, so that means something else is happening in addition to what we've just looked at. So again, with linear, what we saw was as A increases, we also saw that B increased, and that is true here. I hope you can see that, because if we look at a low value of A, we have a low value of B. If we look at a very high value of A, we can see we also have a large value of B. But if we were to look at it in a bit more detail, where if we go up in very easy steps, we can see going up in one step, A increases and B has a small increment, but then later on, if we look at a larger values of A, but with the same increase, we see there's a larger increase for B further up the graph. What that means is that we have a graph that is getting steeper. So if we were to look at it at the bottom, we see it's not that steep, but as you get to the top, it's getting a lot steeper. This means that as A increases, B also increases, but at an increasing rate. So notice how that extra keyword is coming into play here. Use that same logic to the bottom graph. What we see is it is initially quite steep, but as A gets bigger, the steepness, that slope, is getting smaller and smaller, and it might even level off. So here, the steepness, that slope, is decreasing. So what we would say here is that as A increases, B increases at a decreasing rate. So moving on from non-linear, we've looked at linear, non-linear graphs. the only one to look at now is negative slopes, and apply the exact same logic here, just in the opposite direction. So here you see as A increases, that B value is getting smaller. So really easy, we can see that as A increases, B increases. We call this a negative correlation or a negatively proportional. So if you increase A by a certain amount, B would also decrease by a certain amount. Notice how the keywords are very similar, just make sure you get them the correct way round. If you do have a non-linear negative slope, just check how is that slope changing. So here it's getting less steep, so it's a decreasing rate. So we can say that it's inversely proportional to each other, because as A increases, B decreases at a decreasing rate. So descriptions are useful, but obviously in physics you're used to doing a lot of math work within the science and how the maths enables you to understand the physics a bit better. So what we have here, guys, is 3 graphs of 3 different shapes. So we need to bring our math skills now into the physics realm to help us understand. So you might be asked in the exam to calculate the energy stored in the spring, or calculate the distance traveled, or calculate many other things, but you should by that point understand that a lot of those keywords are essentially asking you to calculate the area under the graph. So it could be this first graph here, and if you were to calculate that area, you should hopefully see the shape is a rectangle, and the area of a rectangle is just the A, which is that width here, times B, which is the height of that rectangle. A and B could be changed for other things such as force and extension, or it could even be speed against time or distance against time, but the skill is the same nevertheless. More often you might find you get a triangular shape. What I mean by that is you can see if you were to draw a line down here, you get this right angle triangle, and the area of a right angle triangle is the height of the triangle, the base of the triangle. In our case, it's A and B. It's A times B divided by 2, because you can see the shape looks like a square, it's just we don't include that bit outside the triangle. And then finally, the last shape you might see more often than not in higher tier questions when it's to calculate the distance traveled on a speed time graph, but the shape and the skill is something fundamental. You should hopefully see the shape as a trapezium, because we have 2 lines here that are parallel to each other, whilst the other 2 are not, and you have different angles at each point. So what you have here, guys, if we label the bottom A and the top parallel line B, I can also label the height of it as C. So what we have here is the trapezium rule, and that would be A plus B divided by 2, because what we are doing is we are averaging that long line on the bottom to the shorter one at the top, and we times it by that height, that gap between the 2 lines. So areas, nice, straightforward. 3 shapes that can come up: rectangle, triangle, and a trapezium. Choosing the one more suited for your question can be useful, but if you're not comfortable with the trapezium rule, notice how you could break it down. You could break down this whole large shape into more manageable chunks by creating yourself 2 right angle triangles here, 1 and 2, next to a rectangle. So if you're not comfortable with the trapezium rule, you can break it down like that, but obviously in the exam, time is worth marks. So if it takes you longer to do it, you might want to take that time now before your exam to get comfortable with the trapezium rule. If you're happy with calculating areas, The other math skill we have to bring in is gradients. You might be asked to find the gradient of the line to help you understand or explain or calculate the speed from a graph. And to do this, we again use a triangle, but now we're not looking at the area. We just want to look how steep that line is. To do that, the best way to remember it is to always, from your graph, plot a nice triangle with a right angle off of that line. Choose full numbers if you can, where it meets the corner of the graph. That way it makes your life a lot easier if you're going to count the change in that vertical section and when you count the change in that x direction. So for example, this first graph here has a full box width across and a box and a half width up, and it has a value of 3 vertical, 1 horizontal. So the change in your vertical is 3, the change in your horizontal is 1. So the gradient, how steep that is, it changes 3 vertically for every 1, so we say that is a gradient of 3. If you were to do it for the last graph on the other side of these 3 examples, you can see that it has 1 full box across for 1 full box down, but the box is worth 2. But the change is down 2, so there's a negative 2 down for every 1, which is an answer of -2. And an interesting one that sometimes comes up is describing the case where you have a straight line. So here you have a change in the horizontal, but there's no change in the vertical. So if you were to look at the equation, you would think, oh, the vertical has 0 change. Divide that by 1 box width, and you have an answer of 0. So there is no gradient, so nothing is changing there. So we've covered quite a lot of the graph skills in this session, which gives us plenty of time now to start looking at some past paper questions. So hopefully you've seen the reasons why we want to put some time and effort into graph work. We've looked at the expectations, that level of understanding you should have. We understand what a good graph should look like, how to draw the lines, linear, non-linear, and how to determine if that is an anomaly and to take it out. We've looked at linear graphs and what descriptors we could use. So proportional, directly proportional, non-linear, where we introduce words such as increasing rate, decreasing rate. Finally, we get to some of the calculations such as area, so rectangle, triangle, and a trapezium rule. And then finally, the gradient, which we just saw, which is the skill where you take the change in that vertical versus the change in horizontal once you've added a right angled triangle to your graph. So the final thing is, let's have a look at a good graph, and actually let's look at it from the eyes of the examiner. So here there is no graph plotted. We're going to look at what would the examiner be searching for to give those 4 marks. So this is what we'd see in the mark scheme. That first one, notice how is that fundamental rule of scales. So for each box going across and each box going up, has the pupil, has the student gone up in correct gaps? Have they used a nice appropriate scale of 1 gram per box or half a gram per box? And this is how you get that first mark, just by labeling a graph. Notice how you might think there's no physics there, but you're using a skill of maths to get you to that point. The next 2 points are for plotting. So here, this whole box here is awarded for correctly putting x's in the correct place. If you can plot all 5 points correctly to within 1 small square, so that's how much work you get, that's how much effort points you put in. It has to be to 1 whole box, then you get 5 points. As soon as you get 1 point in the incorrect position, you can drop to a single mark, and if you get 2 points wrong or more, you won't be awarded any mark for plotting points. So there's 3 marks you hopefully will have obtained. And that final one, notice how here it says smooth curve of best fit. So that's that single curve. If it's that shape or if it's that shape, it's a single curve. But notice how it has to begin at 0, 0. Doesn't mention that it has to go through every x. It just says that it's a smooth curve of best fit. So that's 4 quite easy marks just by using a graph. And quite often, once you've got a graph, they'll often ask you to use the graph to do something else. So if we've plotted a nice graph, they could have then asked something such as a statement like this, where it suggests that a student predicts that the speed always increases by a factor of 1.4 if the mass is doubled. The only thing you should take note of here is the word if the mass is doubled. The student finds that when the mass doubles from 0.5 to 1, the suggestion is true. Explain if this is true for other masses. So here, even if you haven't really concentrated on understanding the topic, you can think straight away, my graph skills is going to support me in this question. And I can see here, the whole question is to do with doubling mass, and that when it was done at low mass of 0.5 to 1, they got a value of 1.4 when they worked out how much it grew, or that ratio of increase. And now you're asked to explain if it's true for other masses. So in this question, I'd expect you to go from a 0.5 to 1 to maybe look at what happens if you go from 1 to 2, or if you go from larger masses again, and a simple calculation. So look at the mark scheme, and in a moment we'll actually have a go at a few questions, but look at how the mark scheme guides you through this now. Correct pair of values taken for 1 to 2 grams. So there we go, taking data from the graph and then calculating the ratio. Does it increase by 1.4? And in this case it didn't, so you would have said the student was incorrect. For all of this is graph skills that doesn't necessarily need that physics to help you for it. You're just using everything you can take from the graph. But obviously you'll put all your best efforts into physics because physics is fun. And what we can see here is a fun question now about springs. Use the graph to find the largest force at which Hooke's law is still obeyed. Well, hopefully, if you have covered this, you would understand that Hooke's law is when the graph is still in that linear region, or when there's still a nice straight line, because that force is directly proportional to extension. And as you can see, even if you didn't quite get that, the information they've got is that they've labeled something E here, which is telling you that actually this is the point in which the graph stops being linear and now starts going into a region of non-linear behavior. And we can label that point as 50 newtons. Notice how they already give the units, so there's not even a mark for units, which is a shame. Each spring in one trampoline will experience a maximum force of 58 newtons. Is this spring suitable for use in the trampoline? And there's 2 marks for this. So 1 mark is justifying or agreeing or disagreeing. Is it suitable? So you would have 1 mark for saying yes, it's suitable, no, it's suitable, so long as your explanation is valid. And what we see here is the maximum force is 58 newtons. And the force, the largest force this spring can take is 50 newtons. So if the largest force is 50 newtons, but the spring might take 58 newtons, then it is a nice question, because you can see that 58 is clearly more than 50. So the spring is going to take a force that's greater than the Hooke's law limit, or this elastic limit, so it's not suitable. So you would say something along the lines of the spring is not suitable as the largest force that the spring can withstand, the largest force the spring can withstand is less than the maximum force it will experience. Looking at the next part, so far we've covered a few marks just reading the graph. The next one, here we go, we have a calculate the spring constant. Notice how It's not telling you how to use the graph. It's just giving you information such as the force and extension. And notice how the force is your vertical, the extension is your horizontal. So this is a 3-mark question where you are using the graph to calculate the gradient, but it's not that clear that it's the gradient. So if you're calculating your spring constant, which we often use K, your force, you could take any points on this graph, but obviously we're working out a gradient. So if we do our triangle for this large section here, obviously I would use a ruler, but I can't do that on the screen. We have a change in the vertical axis of 50 and the change in the horizontal is 2.5. So we get 50 divided by 2.5. However, it's in centimeters. I check, it's still in centimeters. So we are happy to do that. And 50 divided by 2.5 is a question you can do quite comfortably. If it's not, you should hopefully have this little calculator or big calculator, whichever which one you have, ready for the exam. And genuinely, if you don't feel comfortable, because a lot of you do get quite worried in the exams and you feel that the maths starts to fail you, use the calculator, input the value. But 50 divided by 2.5 is 20, so you get 20 newtons per centimetre. So 3 marks there, using graph skills to calculate a gradient, not just depending on the physics aspect. The final bit, add a line to the graph for a spring with a smaller spring constant. If you did understand this topic, if you have done it already, you should remember that smaller springs will result in a line that is steeper or less steep. And hopefully if you had put the time in with revision, you understand the line will be less steep. However, you can think of the gradient as well. If the gradient is smaller, if that K is smaller, then the line will be less steep for 2 marks. So overall, we've gone 1, 2, 3, I'll add another 3, 6, 7, 8 marks for graph skills on this one question. We can look at another one quite quickly. Here we've got a question where you have a table, and now it's a plot question. So first of all, the table shows the result from the investigation. Part I, which I have removed because it's not part of the graph, which is to calculate the missing value, which requires use of an equation, but we'll ignore that for now. We can just focus on the plotting aspect and plot the data on the grid below and draw a suitable line. So think plot data, draw line. So plot the data, draw the line. So 2 marks will be for plotting of data, and 1 mark will be for your correct line. And if you remember a few slides ago, when it comes to plotting data, there's quite often 5 points correct for 2 marks. And if you start dropping 1 point, you lose a mark, or you don't obtain the full marks. And if 2 points are incorrect, you do not obtain the marks. So notice how, again, 5 separate data points, and we can go straight into the graph. When the number of cupcake cases is 0, the terminal speed is 0. So we must, if it's not clear to you, you must show the x on 0, 0. Second point, number of cupcake cases is 1, so we come across to 1, and we get a terminal speed of 1.7. Because it's 1.7, sometimes you want to take note and check the value of the little boxes is nice and even, so it is 0.1 per box. So come across to 1 and go up to 1.7, or come up to 2 and come down to 1.987, and make sure you demonstrate that box. Full 1 box of accuracy there, 1.7. When there's 2 cupcake cases, we get a speed of 2.2. Again, come across to 2, up to 2, and go up to 2.2. Notice how that line there is a bit larger than 1 box, so I would remove it and draw it again to make sure it fits that 1 box. I can't plot 3 because we are not focusing on that calculation, so 4 is 2.7, and we can come across to 4 and you could go all the way up to 3 and come down to 2.9, 8 and 2.7. And we can see, hopefully you can see that the line best suitable for this is not a line of best fit, because that would look like that. This is a curve of best fit, so one single line that goes through your data for 3 easy marks. I've put a lot more examples in this, so if you are happy and you want to try some more examples, you'll find them in the rest of this PowerPoint up on the Carlam Cymru's website. And next week you'll have another session on physics, which will be your final session before the winter break. Thank you all for tuning in. All the best.